I'm Marissa. I'm the owner of Celestial Tree, and I just wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about some issues that I think are important in animistic practice, and to also talk about some work I'm sharing with other people right now in case some of this might be interesting to you. So I just want to give you a little tiny bit of background for anyone who doesn't know me. I'm Marissa. I was introduced to animistic practice during a crisis. I basically became hurt and sick and was unable, I was actually sort of temporarily disabled. And I was able to work with shamanic journeying and dreaming and plant spirit medicine to begin to make important decisions about my health, to begin to have sort of little healing miracles that made it possible for me to then have doctors help me, because I was so unstable that doctors couldn't diagnose me or help me, and also to finally be able to take the herbs and other supplements that I needed to really begin to heal. Also, animistic practice completely reorganized my life and set me on a completely different path. So obviously I have a very strong and heart connection to this work. I personally experienced how empowering it can be. But I also think there are some kind of issues or maybe misunderstandings that I think can be helpful just to talk about a little bit. So one of the things I just wanted to say is that I tend to work with people who, and I will be looking down a little bit for this, but I tend to work with people who are starting to hear the voices of their ancestors, particularly ancestors who connect to the pre-Christian or the animistic ancestors. But these people may not have a tradition, or even if they do have a tradition, they may be strongly guided to also work with their own ancestral wisdom. Hold on for 1 minute. Hi, Kirsten. And the issues with working with your ancestral wisdom is that that's wonderful, but right now, for many of us, we don't have unbroken traditions to work with. So, that kind of sets up a complicated situation. Also, sometimes studying in a class, the shamanic path or the animistic path, can be hard for people. So right now I'm offering Zoom mentoring sessions with people where I work on some of the issues that come up when you're trying to do animistic practice. So I want to talk a little bit about 3 of those issues and how they're showing up in some of the work I'm doing with other people. So the first one is understanding shamanic trance states. A lot of people are taught with core shamanism, or they follow a tradition where they're taught one specific type of animistic or shamanic divination. And like with core shamanism, it's usually journeying with a drum or a rattle. I think this is wonderful. There's nothing wrong with it. It's great. But a lot of people don't realize that there are other types of trance states in animistic traditions. There is literal soul travel, where people have out-of-body experiences. There is spirit possession, where your spiritual teachers or guides, you're like a medium and you're channeling them. They actually move through you. There is trance states where the spirits come and talk to you while you're using tobacco or some other substance. There is basically working with a very light trance state where you're constantly communicating the whole time to your spirits while you look like, that you and I could be talking while this is happening. And of course there's, the journeying with the drum that I already talked about. And then there's also forms of shamanic dreaming, which are very close to lucid dreaming, only you go into the other world with your shamanic helpers with intent. So the first question with shamanic trance states are, which practices fit most closely with your gifts? And that's usually what you want to develop the most. It's good to kind of cross-train by learning some of the other ones. It helps. But with your, both whatever tradition you're going to be part of and also with your own divination practices, it's good to track what works for you in terms of what matches your natural gifts. Because everyone has slightly different gifts, and it doesn't invalidate your animistic practice if your gifts aren't exactly like everyone else's. And then within the gifts, the other thing it's important to understand is that not everyone is a seer. Some people are. They go and they see things very clearly in the other world, but some people hear or feel more. This is also just as valid. In fact, there are times when this is an actual advantage. You can be fooled by what you see, but it's harder to be fooled by what you feel or hear. So all of these are sometimes questions that come up when I'm working with people, and I just thought that just by talking about it a little bit now, I could maybe help to just share a little bit of a possibly different perspective. Thank you for outlining the variety of different trance states. It's good to hear how many different ways there are to engage with the unseen worlds. Yeah, and it's important because in different ancestral traditions, especially if you do wind up working with a tradition, certain trance states and certain gifts are specifically recognized as being very important. And they're not always the same ones. So cultivating different gifts, if you do decide to go into a tradition, or if you decide to recover your ancestral knowledge, helps, I think, a person to align better with that practice when you finally begin to learn it. So the other thing is that you also want to have a way of practicing with someone who's already done this, so that when you go forward, you can do it on your own comfortably. And that's really what you're looking for, is to have comfort with this so that you'll use it when you need it. So the next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is the pitfalls around the whole discussion about cultural appropriation. So let me just see if there's a very good point that sometimes you can be fooled by what you see. Yeah, I mean, that even happens to clairvoyance. And I remember seeing a video with the healer Rosalind Breuer, who wrote Wheels of Light. And she's an excellent and highly trained clairvoyant. And she said that she always seconds anything she sees with her ability to feel energy. And obviously she's not going into a journey, but she's still accessing a light trance state in order to do her work. And, you know, she's, even with as helpful as her clairvoyant sight is, she always brings in another gift just to make sure. So thank you. That's an excellent point. So basically, I want to talk a little bit about cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation, as I see it, is using traditions without permission. Now, this has come to mean in mainstream conversation using traditions that are not of your blood ancestors. This is a little bit problematic because actually there are people who are highly trained by elders in a tradition who have no genetic connection to that tradition. They are fully trained as medicine people or shamans, and they have absolute permission to share ceremonies, to teach and train others. There are other people who are of the blood ancestry of a particular tradition who have not been trained and who do not have tradition to do certain ceremonies. So really, cultural appropriation in terms of medicine traditions is really a function of training and recognition by an elder. So how does this kind of affect people who are trying to bring back our ancestral traditions? For us, we don't really have many elders to tell us what is within the tradition or what is outside of it. Plus, we have another problem in that many of us need to study other traditions to fill in the gaping holes left by the destruction of our traditions over time. So, and in many traditions, this is, it's known that this is done, that this needs to be done. Traditions aren't kept in a museum. They're basically open to new ideas as long as the ideas harmonize with the people's way of life and with their connection to their ancestors. The ancestors and the helping spirits who guide that tradition. So I just kind of wanted to shine a little bit of light of some of the pitfalls about getting into this idea that if you study a tradition that isn't your own ancestry, you're automatically doing cultural appropriation. Or that, conversely, that it's impossible to culturally appropriate a tradition that you are related to, because it is, unfortunately. And also the third problem, which is when you're sincerely trying to bring back the teachings of your ancestors, and how do you go about doing that in a way that is as respectful as you can, since you don't have people to ask permission of most of the time, except for in the broadest sense of the term, in the sense that people who grow up in a culture, like English people who grow up in England, would have an advantage in knowing what is English over me. But there aren't elders, Anglo-Saxon elders, to say, this is of our tradition. There are people learning about Anglo-Saxon traditions who may be good guides and teachers, but they're not the same thing as elders that the Karo have, the Karo Indians in Peru, or that the Lakota people have, or that some of the Siberian cultures have. It's a different relationship because it's a broken tradition. And the third thing I wanted to talk about before I start talking about some possible solutions to this is I wanted to talk about, is it possible to either create a soul healing, like a soul retrieval, or to integrate a soul healing or soul retrieval on your own? Let me just answer a question here. Really enjoying what you were saying in terms of the complexities of people who have lost their traditions, who are trying to bring back the traditions of their ancestors in tandems with an initiated tradition. Yeah, I mean, I honestly think in some ways that's the best of all possible worlds, unless you have fully healed your ancestral connections. If you have, then the static between you and the ancient ancestors is removed, and they can start telling you things. It's always helpful, I think, to learn what you can from other people. Even initiated shamans and medicine people within traditions learn from practitioners in other traditions. It's just part of the natural process of learning and adapting. So I don't ever think there's a problem with that. But so you can do that, and I guess what I'm trying to say is you can learn from other people while still retaining your focus on bringing back your ancestral traditions, if that's your focus at this time. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the complexities and the possibilities of learning either to bring your own soul parts back or to integrate them once you receive a soul healing. Soul retrieval is probably one of the more complex types of shamanic healing work to do, although really any shamanic healing practice is complex in some ways. But you have to have really good discernment when you do soul retrieval for two reasons. Two of the worst problems, and there's a healer named Mary Shutan who wrote a really interesting article about this. Two of the worst problems that you can have with soul retrieval that get people into trouble are two basic things. First of all, you can bring something back that isn't a soul part. Sometimes people get confused for the same reasons of what I was saying before, where you can't always trust your eyes. Sometimes you have to listen and feel at the same time. And in soul retrieval work, you absolutely have to have at least one helping spirit that you absolutely trust, that is almost always right, and almost, that has a really excellent, dependable track record, because you're going to be working very closely with at least one helping spirit, probably more than one. The other issue that can happen, besides bringing back something that isn't a soul part, is bringing back a soul part before it's ready to come back. Now, the reason why soul parts often don't want to come back is for two reasons. They're either, well, actually three. They're either not healed enough. In other words, they need extra energy and healing from the spirit world, from your helping spirits, to even be willing to come back. The other thing that can happen is they think that you're not ready. In other words, they know that when they come back, they're coming back because they expect your life to be different, to be the kind of life that they could be with you in. And they think that maybe you're not open to changing. This is usually something you can work with pretty easily with the self part. But the third complicated issue that has to do with actual shamanic healing work is that sometimes you have to kind of give them a better deal. And the way you do this is they're usually so impressed with the powerful helping spirits that you bring with you into the journey, or that the healer brings in, that they want to be with these beings. And so they agree to come back because they want to spend more time with these really cool beings that are hanging out with you. Because these are often child parts, and children are impressed by things like animals or powerful, loving, helping beings, things like that. So those are kind of, and also the soul parts can have very complicated traumas. They can have cords or things like that, where there needs to be a real healing before the soul part can come back. So Robert Moss found a way of working with dreaming, so that with coaching, a person can be taught to bring back their own soul parts. Also, this work is an excellent dress rehearsal for the skills that you need to basically integrate a soul part. Because while there are some shamans who are so powerful that the process almost just sort of happens to you, even when those cultures, there are things that you do like offerings or other practices that help the situation manifest into a healing. And certainly the way soul retrieval is practiced in our culture, you as a recipient of the healing are involved in the healing journey afterwards. And it really helps to be able to dialogue with these soul parts and with your helping spirits. And in a session, that's where we practice how to do this. So let me just see. Hey, Lynn. Good to see you. It's wonderful. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about some sessions that I'm doing, some Zoom sessions that I'm doing, and how what I'm offering might answer some of these issues. So the first session I'm doing is one about just sort of understanding shamanic trance states. People come to this because either they want to learn different kinds of divination practices, or they just want their journeys to be more effective or consistent, or sometimes they have a fear of journeying. There's this sort of idea, this myth out there that if you have a gift at journeying, it just happens and it's really easy, and that's just not true. There are very talented people that, because of ancestral issues or past life issues, have trouble with journeying. And sometimes working in an individual session, we just try some different practices that are sort of resonate with your natural gifts. And hopefully we can kind of work through these blocks so that journeying can become much more effortless for you. We also work on finding divination practices besides journeying that match your gifts, so that you have a way of working when you're not journeying, when you're in a lighter trance state that's consistent and that complements your animistic practice, and that also mirrors your like particular set of gifts. Sometimes also the divinations can help you understand what you see in your journeys, if for some reason you're blocked and you're just not getting a clear answer. The other thing that this does is by practicing, we're kind of creating a safe space so that you can take these skills out and practice. And that's the important thing. You want to trust them and be confident so that when you need them, when something happens and you really need to understand them, you can just do it. You don't think about it, you just do it. So that's the benefit of this session, type of shamanic coaching session. The second kind of coaching session is a little bit more connected to people who've begun to work out whatever connection they might have with their ancestral helping spirits. In this session, what we're doing is we're working with the ancestral helping spirits as a guide to help begin to teach you ways to fill in the missing pieces in whatever traditional knowledge that you're trying to learn. Oftentimes, through dreams and through just sort of inner knowing or through visions, the ancestors will communicate a great deal of information about practices that were important to them. Practical things like growing food or taking care of yourself or using herbs, spiritual practices, ceremonies, creative ideas, ways to work with other people. They're usually grounded in their traditions, but often, let's say you have a dream or a vision, you get a fragment of it. You have to take this and somehow work this into something that you can actually do. So with this series of practices, basically what we're working with is identifying an area of your life that the ancestors are trying to help you, that you're trying to co-create a change with. Basically, you want to listen to, and I listen and offer resources and guidance that will help you to kind of fill in or understand what they're trying to get you to do. And then I try to fill in with traditional knowledge that I've been blessed to learn from traditional teachers where and when it's appropriate. I feel like this way of working is not cultural appropriation. And it's also, you have permission in the sense that this is directly coming from your ancestors. It doesn't make you a person who's recognized by the tradition, but I think it's a really good first step. And I'll give you a short example. I have been trying to learn the runes because I have a Scandinavian ancestor who's been communicating with me this way. But yes, while I'm studying books and all that kind of thing, what he does is he communicates with me by, I see the rune in nature, like in a tree branch or in marks on the road. And so for right now, I'm only working with the runes that I see that he's communicated with me. Those are the ones I work with the most. This is not, as far as I know, the way many people work with runes. It doesn't make me a rune master or anything of the kind, but it's just a way of connecting the dots so that I can begin to really work with this in a way that's integrated. And this is something that basically I'm working with other people at this time for them to help, make this a part of their life too. And the last session I wanted to talk about is basically a session where we use the practices from soul recovery that are based on, Robert Moss teaches a version of this, some other people teach versions of this. It's a little bit borrows from some of the animistic dream work healing practices to basically either integrate a soul retrieval, sometimes through working with powerful places in nature, sometimes through going in and with a journey together. Sometimes it helps if another person holds space for you while you're doing this work. Or to begin the process of learning how to retrieve your own soul parts, which actually do sometimes come back by themselves, by the way. And this is done also in an individual Zoom session. So I just wanted to kind of let you know a little bit about how I'm trying to work with people at this time to interact with and address some of the concerns that come up when you're trying to reconnect with an animistic practice and you're not fully working within a tradition. If there's some way I can assist you, if you have questions or if you have any comments, please feel free to either message me or leave them underneath this live stream. And I also have a group called Animistic Earth Medicine on Facebook, as well as a Patreon called Shamanic Earth Medicine, where we're learning, journeying, dreaming, and my sister teaches sacred tobacco and working with powerful places in nature and earth healing. So it's been wonderful being able to share some ideas with you about some of the session work I do, and I hope to see you in the future. Blessings.